Hey y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. Okay, so it is officially October. It's fall, y'all, and that is crazy. I cannot believe that the year is almost over, honestly. Like, whew, that's insane. This video is my September wrap up, and I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of these books, honestly. This was a weird reading month for me. Like, I got through a lot of books, but all of the books that I showed in my September TBR video, I think I've only read one book out of that entire pile, and the rest were just mood reads. So I don't know what was going on with me. I think because it's fall, I just got more into a thriller and horror mood, and that's kind of why, like, the books that I chose were not the books that were in that video. So yeah, anyways, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I read 10 books in September, which I thought was pretty good for myself because, wow, with everything going on, like with work and stuff like that, I was really surprised I even got that far. But I'm really proud of myself nonetheless. So I'm not gonna hold up the physical copy of any of these books just because I don't feel like messing with my bookshelf, and like, popping up the picture on the screen gives you the same effect. All right, it does. So we're just gonna go with it. So let's get started. So the first book that I read for the month of September was Rise to the Sun by Leah Johnson, and this was such a cute read. I love this book. I rated this about a 4.25 stars, and I just thought it was lovely, to be honest. I actually got this book a while back from, I think, Amazon, like, yeah, a while back, and I have been saving it, but I knew I wanted to read it soon, or at least before the end of the year, and I chose September to do that, and I'm so glad that I did because it still gave me those summer feels right before, like, we got into the fall season. Like, I felt like this was my last, like, closure and my last, like, summer book, and for that, I'm grateful because it was a great book. So this story follows two young girls named Olivia and Tony, and they meet at this music festival that takes place over 3 days, and throughout these 3 days you get to learn more about these two characters, and it's more so a coming of age story. So on the back of the book here it says 2 girls, 3 days, 1 life-changing music festival, and that's really like the whole, like, plot of the book. It's just following these 2 girls and their 2 friends throughout this music festival and kind of what shenanigans they get up to, but also having them face real challenges and problems that they have going on in their personal lives. And I just thought this was brilliant. This is an LGBTQ plus focus book, and I just enjoyed it. This is the first one that I've read within that realm, and I think that Leah Johnson is a beautiful writer when it comes to imagery. She did such a great job at capturing how music festivals and concerts can make someone feel, and it just made me miss it so much, to be honest. I miss going to concerts, like I think most people, but reading it, it made me feel like I was transported to a concert, because you know that anticipation of getting ready and getting to see your favorite singer or band or whatever the case is. Also just like the actual feeling of being in the crowd while your favorite singer or whoever is performing. It's just like so interesting to think about how, like, you know, you're in this room with your favorite artist, but also all of these people are with you, and you guys are sharing the same experience of loving this person's craft and their music, and you're just dancing and singing along to the words, and you just have that connection with these people that you don't know. Like, you're connected through music is what I'm trying to get at. I love how music really connects people, and I just really enjoyed the imagery and the sensory elements within this book. I think that Leah did a great job at really capturing that atmospheric tone that comes with music festivals and concerts. Now, something in the book does happen which is very scary but also very real, and I felt like that did suck a lot of the life out of the story, and that was, I think, of course, the point or the aftermath of what took place. Like, that is what's going to happen, unfortunately, but it definitely made me go from having like a light, airy feeling to just crashing and burning, like how when you drink coffee and you're so like hyped up, and then towards the middle or end of the day you're just like completely like exhausted. That's how I felt after I read the story. So for that, I did give it a 4.2 star. So that is why I didn't rate it a full 5, but I still thought the story was great nonetheless. I also would have liked if Leah Johnson would have included an epilogue at the end. I think because of this music festival only taking place for 3 days, you obviously know that the characters are going to have to return back to their hometowns and everything like that. So I would have liked to see an epilogue where, you know, we get a where are they now and what happens next, but I understand that that's not always going to be the case. You know, that's just me being needy like that. But yeah, I just would have liked that. But a lot of topics of death and grief and mourning explored here. I do recommend looking up trigger warnings for this book because there are quite a few. The next book that I read for this month was No Exit by Taylor Adams, and this was a wild ride, and I say that about a lot of books, but this one, I'm still thinking about this book and thinking about that plot, because man, oh man, did Taylor Adams snap with this book. Like, he did that with this book. I'm sorry. I rated this a 4-star out of 5, and I will get into why this wasn't a complete 5. So this is actually about a young woman who decides to drive up to her hometown / her childhood home during a raging blizzard because her mother is going through health issues and she needs to get to her hometown to see her mother. So while she is, you know, making this drive through this snowstorm, she ends up going to this rest stop to kind of, you know, gather herself and get herself together and kind of wait out the storm a bit. And while she is at this rest stop, there are other people here, I think about 4 other people possibly, and she realizes that there is a little girl locked up in a cage in one of these people's cars in the trunk. So our main character has to figure out, one, how is she going to get herself and this little girl out alive, but also figure out who is a monster among them. So yes, and that story, that's pretty much the story. I don't want to give too much away because you know how thrillers are, but that's pretty much like the synopsis. And I thought immediately when I read that, I knew I was going to be hooked. It was right in my alley. It has the isolated trope. It has a powerful badass heroine who is, you know, leading the charge when it comes to this story, and it just sounded like such an interesting plot. Honestly, blizzards and being stranded is like one of my irrational fears. I have an irrational fear of just like being stranded, like, you know, broken down car or being at a rest stop like this where there's no way out, no exit. Again, and there's like a raging blizzard going on in the midst of all of it. So yeah, this had all of my fears pretty much wrapped up into the book perfectly with a bow, and brilliant, phenomenal, sensational, loved it. I didn't give this a 5-star just because Taylor Adams included some like racist slurs in here, which I don't think necessarily helped drive the plot in the slightest. The racist slurs were coming from the antagonist, and honestly, we could tell very early on that the antagonist was a bad person because they kidnapped a child. So I don't think we needed to add or sprinkle in some racism to really hit it home that this person is an awful person, but yeah. So for that, I gave it a 4-star, but I still thought it was a perfect plot, perfect pacing. The ending was great. I loved it. So the next book that I read is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria, and I love this. I love this. I'm actually still in the process of filming a reading vlog for this video, so that will be coming soon. I mean, for this book, and that will be coming soon. I'm reading now Alexis Daria's second book in this series, I want to say, and it's called A Lot Like Adios, and that book follows Jasmine's cousin Michelle. But I do plan on filming a reading vlog, so I'm going to go more into my thoughts during that situation, but I will at least give a brief synopsis and kind of explain what I thought about the book. So this follows a young woman named Jasmine who is a soap opera actress, as well as following the life of her co-star / like love interest named Ashton, and he is a telenovela star. There is a difference between soap operas and telenovela. So it is following their 2 journeys, and they both get casted on the same soap opera, or is it a telenovela? They both get casted on the same show, and they are now, you know, kind of like in this forced proximity trope. And at first, Ashton is a little bit standoffish. She's more shy and reserved, whereas Jasmine is very friendly, very kind, very charming. And you can tell she goes out of her way to make people feel comfortable, and she wants people to, you know, be her friend essentially. And so she's trying her hardest to kind of get Ashton to open up a bit more and trying to get him to, you know, just not be so shy. But Ashton is not having it because he has a lot going on in his personal life that he's working through. So he doesn't really like open up to anyone, not just Jasmine. Well, of course, as you can imagine, this is a romance, so as things, you know, move forward and time moves on, Jasmine and Ashton do become closer, and Ashton starts to open up to her a bit more. He tells her what's going on in his personal life, and then the story pretty much takes off from there. So I thought this was an interesting book. This was my only 5-star read of the month. I loved it from start to finish. This has that element of TV and film, and it talks about, you know, it talks about Hollywood, it talks about the entertainment industry, so soap operas and telenovelas. And I personally love soap operas. I used to watch Young and the Restless when I was younger because my grandparents used to watch that show. So I already grew up with a flair for the dramatics and the theatrics, okay? So I knew I was going to love this book, and Jane the Virgin is one of my favorite, like, you know, telenovelas. So I just knew that this was going to be right in my alley, and I love Alexis Daria's writing. I'm sorry. She is from the Bronx. She's Puerto Rican, she's from New York, and she's from the Bronx specifically. So you could just see that through her writing, and I loved it. It just felt like I was reading something from like a friend. Like the writing was casual, but like you were still able to get through it, obviously. But it was casual and it was just nice. It felt like, you can tell that Alexis Daria is just a girl from around the way, and I loved it. I love this story so much, and there's really not much more I can say about it, to be honest. It's great. I recommend picking it up if you're into the entertainment industry in any capacity, but also if you love a good, you know, romance and like a nice slow burn. I don't think it was like an excruciatingly long slow burn. I thought like it was just right. The pacing was just right. So yes, definitely recommend this. Next book that I read was a classic actually, and it was The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. And honestly, y'all, this was a 4-star read for me. I loved it. I loved it so much. So I ended up challenging myself to read a classic every single month, at least one, and this was the one that I decided to start off with for the month of September, and I'm so glad that I did, because this was a very accessible classic. I think the writing in here, the writing style is very easy for anyone to digest. This was originally translated from French, but like, to me, you can't even tell. I thought it was great. I do have the Penguin Black Spine like classic edition, and that has footnotes and notes about like on commentary about the story, and you know, certain themes that were explored and all of that type of stuff. So I like that edition just because I was able to look at those if I wanted to look into something a bit deeper, but you can still follow the story along reading whatever edition, you know, as long as it's in your language. But this is about a young woman named Christine Daae, who is an opera singer, and she does perform regularly at this opera house, the Paris Opera House, and she is a very talented opera singer, and because of this she is met with the Phantom of the Opera, also known as Eric. And Eric's whole mission here is to make Christine a star, essentially, because he sees her talent and he sees the potential that she has. And so because he is pretty much determined to get Christine's name and voice out there, he devotes himself to her, and he expects her to devote herself to him in return. Well, while Christine is working with the Phantom and trying to, you know, not upset him and make him, you know, happy and things like that, she ends up rekindling and rebuilding a friendship with her childhood friend Raoul. And Raoul has always had a crush on Christine, and Christine has always had feelings for him, but you know how what happens when you grow up, you guys go on different paths and all of that stuff. But they reunite at the opera house during one night, and they start to rebuild their friendship. And Christine is trying to keep Raoul at a distance just because she knows how the Phantom gets and how jealous he can get. But sparks start to fly between her and Raoul, and that upsets the Phantom, and the story takes off from there. So this is a very creepy book. This is definitely falls into that gothic literature realm, and I thought this was brilliant. I thought the Phantom was so complex, like he was scary, he was eerie. You didn't want to feel sorry for him, but you also kind of did, and he was also funny. Like, it's so interesting how this book was written back in the 1900s, but the humor from it, the dark humor from it, translates to today in 2021. I was cracking up at some of the things that the Phantom said because he was just out of pocket. He was wildin', okay? He was wildin', and I just thought he was hilarious. But like I said, I also felt sad for him in a few ways too. Despite him haunting the opera house and terrorizing some of the patrons that go to the opera house, but also who work there, I still thought he was funny nonetheless. And I like how everything tied together in the end, and how you understood the build-up and what was going on. So yeah, I thought this was a great classic. I plan on watching the movie soon and comparing the two and seeing how the movie fares to the book. But this is definitely going on my list of like favorite classics, I feel like, of all time. Even though I rated it a 4, I think I am going to bump it up to a 4.5 just because like I'm still thinking about this and I just thought it was brilliant. So the next book that I have here is The Deal by Elle Kennedy, and yes, BookTok made me do it, okay? I was putting this off, trying to act like I wasn't going to read this series, but of course I ended up caving in and reading it, and I'm glad I did because I'm having a ball with this off-campus series. That's what it's called, the off-campus series, because there are, I think now, 5 books within this whole series. Elle Kennedy just came out with her latest book for this, and it's called The Legacy, and that is a Where Are They Now book on all of these characters. So I'm currently on the 3rd one now, but the one that I'm talking about in this review is of course the first one, and it's called The Deal. So brief synopsis, this is a sports romance, and the sport in question is hockey. And this story follows a girl named Hannah, who is definitely that type of girl who is not like other girls. She is like the type that, you know, will let you know that every 10 seconds. And it also follows a guy named Garrett who is on the hockey team at their university called Briar University. And Garrett is the captain of this hockey team. So Hannah and Garrett couldn't be any more different. Garrett, of course, is like, you know, all about sports and all of that stuff, whereas Hannah is more so about the arts and acting and drama and all of that type of stuff. So they actually meet in one of their classes because Garrett is not doing the best in his philosophy class, whereas Hannah is excelling, and he tries to get Hannah to tutor him, but Hannah is not having it. She does not have the time to tutor Garrett, but that doesn't stop Garrett. So Garrett keeps bothering her until finally she decides to give in and tutors him, and the story takes off from there. So I thought that this was a, you know, I thought it was a cute book. I will say that Elle Kennedy knows how to do smut. She knows how to do smut, and she knows how to do it well, okay? Like, I know a lot of the girls out here, you know, are like doing their thing with smut, but no, Elle Kennedy, if you want to read that type of stuff, I recommend picking up any book from the Off-Campus series, because they can be read as standalones, but I think it does make a better reading experience if you read all of them together, to be honest, or in order. But she does smut very well. Scenes are very, very steamy. But I thought that this was a cute book, like the romance portion of it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Hannah, I'm gonna be honest. She was very insufferable. She was that type of girl that was not like other girls, and she would let you know every 10 seconds, and it was very, very irritating. But it was also a product of its time. That was really the trope back then when it came to the late 2010s era books. A lot of the female characters were written in that way, which, like, a dark time, to be honest. I'm glad that we're kind of progressing and moving past that, but yeah, she was written in that way, so she was very insufferable. I did empathize and sympathize with her because she went through a lot of traumatic events, but in terms of just like her personality, I just wasn't vibing with it. I do think she's funny, but I just wasn't like vibing with her entirely. Garrett, on the other hand, Garrett is a king. I loved him. Hands down, one of my favorite male like love interests that I have come across in a romance story thus far. I thought he was hilarious. I loved his banter with Hannah. I thought their banter was one of the best parts of the story. The way they would go back and forth, loved it. They understood each other's sense of humor, and I understood their sense of humor, so for that, I appreciated it. But yes, Garrett was great. Phenomenal. So yeah, I did rate this about a 3.25 star, I'm pretty sure, which I don't think is bad. I don't think that's bad. I think that's still, like, you know, above average. Like, it wasn't a 2, it wasn't a 1, but there were some things that I just couldn't get past, like that. And there are a few problematic comments in this book that Elle Kennedy kind of, you know, included in here, which, yikes, I didn't really care for that. But either way, I thought that this was a nice like palette cleanser, and if you're in the mood for that like YA 2010s, like trashy but in a good way romance type of book, I definitely recommend picking up probably any book from this series, to be honest. The next book that I have here is called The White City by Carolina Ramqvist, and this is actually a translated read, and this was translated from Swedish to English. And I was on Amazon one day just browsing books, and I noticed this pop up, so it sounded interesting, and I just decided to put it in my cart. And honestly, this was a very strange book. I'm trying to pull up like what I rated this, and I gave this a 3.5 stars, so almost a solid 4. And I did enjoy like the larger themes within this book, but I just thought it was very strange, like even a little bit too weird for me, to be honest. But this is essentially about a young woman named Karen, who is a mother, a new mother, and she's trying to navigate motherhood all on her own. Unfortunately, she lost her husband. We don't really figure out how she loses her husband, but she loses her husband and she loses all of her assets. And this is a story basically just following her trying to cope with day-to-day life as a new mom, as a new single mom, with her baby named Dream. And this is such an unsettling and bleak read, in my opinion. I just was like so uncomfortable the entire time I was reading it, because you could feel the physical and mental pain that Karen was experiencing, because she's by herself raising Dream. So she's very, very isolated, and this story takes place in the dead of winter. So there's not really too many people coming to visit her and like, you know, getting out of their house to come see her and check up on her. So I just felt so bad for her in that regard, because you could tell that she didn't really even want to be a mother in the beginning, but it just kind of happened. And now she has to obviously adjust and deal with this and raise Dream and take care of Dream. So it was just such an unsettling read. I thought like the themes of motherhood and navigating that and what postpartum can do to a person's psyche was very interesting, and I thought those are very important topics. And I felt like this book really showed how women don't really have that many resources to overcome postpartum depression in a healthy way. But other than that, the writing style wasn't my thing. It wasn't my fave. Now, that doesn't say I won't read more translated reads, and that doesn't mean that I won't read more Swedish translated reads, but like, I just wasn't feeling this one, that's all. Very short though. I liked how short it was. The chapters are very quick. So if you're looking for like a very quick read, you know, consider it. I think it was about like 100 and something pages, and I finished it within like a day. So yeah, I thought it was good for that. And again, I rated it a 3.5, so it was almost a 4 because I really did like the themes explored here, but the writing style I just couldn't get behind. I'm sorry. There were times, this was written in like third person, and the way that the dialogue was explained, like whenever Karen actually did have a chance to speak to someone when she wasn't completely isolated, it was almost jarring because you spend so much time in Karen's head that when she actually does speak to someone, you're like, whoa, what's going on? But also, when she does speak to someone, she's usually speaking to another woman, and the writer, Carolina, will write it in a way where it's like, she said X, and then she said X, and it's like, wait, who said what though? Like, did Karen say this, or did her friend say this? So that wasn't really vibing with me at all, and it was kind of giving me a headache, but I still enjoyed the story for what it was. Whew, we're almost done, almost done. The next book that I read here was The Ivies by Alexa Don, or Donnie. I still don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I did talk about this in my fall books recommendations video, so I won't go into like too much detail, I guess, about like the plot, but basically I will say that this is a story that follows a group of 5 friends that are known as the Ivies, and they will do anything they can to get into their desired Ivy League school. So they will sabotage, they will scheme, they will manipulate, they will scam, and possibly even murder to get an acceptance letter to a school like Yale or Harvard or UPenn, etc. And yeah, so it is a thriller, it is a dark academia type of book, so if you're interested in that genre or that, you know, realm, definitely recommend picking this up. But this is a book that is essentially a sinister take on the 2020 college admission scandal, which I still think about because that was just crazy. But this book really does explore not just like, you know, the murder mystery element of the story, but it does talk about a lot of, you know, affirmative action and white supremacy and status symbols and prestige, and why are the rich so obsessed with getting into the Ivy League schools. I just thought that this book was fascinating in that regard, and I've always been fascinated with the psychology behind the rich wanting to attend or wanting to have their children attend an Ivy League school, just because a lot of the times when you attend these schools, you're attending them to get wealth, acquire wealth in some type of capacity, whether that's through, you know, the type of major that you go through or whatever the case is. So yeah, it talks a lot about that. It talks about, you know, legacies and how inherently, you know, racist that is and problematic it is, and it also just talks about, like I said, affirmative action and the pressure that young people put on themselves but also get put on to them to get into these top schools. So yeah, I thought this was interesting. It was a good YA thriller in my opinion. I thought the writing was very mature and very smart. I really enjoyed how Alexa wrote this story and the writing style. So yeah, I will probably take a look at her catalog and see what else she has written and try to pick up something else from her. I also should have mentioned for The Ivies, I did rate that a 4 out of 5 stars, so my bad. The next book that I read after The Ivies, I wanted to pick up another thriller, and I decided to read The Chain by Adrienne McKenty. And I actually picked up this book because I saw a booktuber by the name of, I think, Erin Megan. I will put her correct name up on the screen here, but she is a horror booktuber, and she talked about this book briefly in one of her videos, and I just thought it sounded interesting when I looked up the synopsis. And I don't want to give too much away, so I will just quickly read like the vague synopsis. And it says here, when a mother is targeted by a dangerous group of masterminds, she must commit a crime to save her kidnapped daughter or risk losing her forever. So I rated this about a 3.75 out of 5, which I thought was still pretty good. Again, above average in my opinion, almost a solid 4, but we will get into why I didn't give it a solid 4. This book I thought was very reminiscent of a Criminal Minds episode, and that is why I think I liked it so much, because Criminal Minds is one of my favorite shows. I can only take it in small doses, to be honest, because the plots and the characters in some of these episodes are really crazy and just brutal. So that is how I felt with this story. I was on the edge of my seat while I was reading it the entire time because of how gut-wrenching and gnawing this was. The main character, Rachel, is just, whew, man, you're really like, you really feel for her and for all of the parents that are involved in this situation, to be honest, like involved in the chain, because this has gone back for a while, and if you try to go against it in any capacity, you could lose your life or your child could lose their life. So it's just like a lot of like, you feel like you're walking on pins and needles and eggshells the entire time you're reading this story, because you're like, oh my god, one wrong move and like that's it, you're done. The chain could break, the chain could have a chain reaction and kill multiple people. Like, it's just really insane. I don't know how Adrienne McKenty came up with this, but he did study philosophy at Oxford, and he does apply a lot of philosophical references to the story. So I feel like that's where he came up. I feel like that's how he pretty much came up with all of this type of stuff. But I thought this was a great plot. I thought the story was unique and refreshing. I've never read anything like this before in a thriller or a horror book, to be honest. All right, so the second to last book that I read for the month of September was The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. So right after I finished the deal, I had to like move on to The Mistake, and I gave this one a 4-star. I enjoyed this one so much more than the deal. Oh my goodness, I liked both of the main characters, Grace and Logan. Loved it, loved it. So this book follows Garrett's best friend, John Logan, but he goes by Logan. They pretty much all most of them, some of them go by their last name, some of them go by their first names, but John Logan goes by his last name, Logan. And Logan is so interesting because in the first book, in the deal, you don't really get to know him or know his personality. He's very quiet, kind of very like in his own head pretty much, and kind of like is reserved. So you don't really get to know too much about him or his personality, whereas you do the others. So I was kind of skeptical going into this book because we don't really get to know John Logan until this book. And I'm so glad that I got to know more about him because I just thought he was so interesting. He's going through a lot in his personal life. Pretty much all of these characters that Elle Kennedy comes up with are going through some traumatic stuff in their life. A lot of them seem to have daddy issues, which I find very interesting. But yeah, so he's going through a lot in his personal life, but he is a part of the hockey team, just like Garrett, and like I said, they're best friends. And on the flip side, you have his love interest named Grace, and Grace is actually a freshman in the beginning of the book, and then she becomes a sophomore towards the end of the story. And Grace is like pretty much like, I don't know how to describe Grace because she is confident, but she's also like not confident at the same time. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, her personality is just so fascinating to me too. But Grace is a very likable character in my opinion. So anyway, her and John Logan, you know, meet in a very like interesting meet cute way. John Logan ends up like accidentally knocking on her door. Yes, I said accidentally. He ends up accidentally knocking on her door thinking that his friend lived there, when in reality he didn't. And him and Grace actually strike up a conversation during this whole ordeal, and the story takes off from there, and their romance starts to blossom, you know, throughout the story. And I just thought that this was great. Again, I don't want to give too much away just because like you don't have to read the deal to read this one. They are standalone books, but like it just makes it more fun to read them in order because the characters in the first book are in this book. So yeah, but either way, I thought this was great. This made me want to continue on with the series, to be honest. And it's so interesting because a lot of people do not like The Mistake. A lot of people think that this book is the most boring one out of the series, and I'm just here to tell you that they're wrong, they're lying. Do not listen to them. The Mistake is a masterpiece. I thought it was great. The characters are more complex. I felt like there were more layers added to them, and I just felt like they were more likable in general. Like, I was rooting for both of them. In the beginning, in the beginning, Logan did do something that really irritated the hell out of me, and I was like, oh, I'm not seeing it for him after this. But after I read the story, I love him. I love him. I think he's like my second favorite after Garrett, to be honest. Like, oh, I mean, this is the only one that I read, like the only other one that I read so far. I'm currently reading the score, so we will see how I like Dean, because Dean is the playboy of the group. But John Logan, I love him, and I love this book. So yeah, don't listen to people when they say this is boring. It is phenomenal, okay? And the last book that I have here, oh my gosh, my camera is dying. So the last book that I have here is And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. And y'all, this book was very weird. Like, weird just like The White City, but like this is a horror book, so it was even more disturbing. And honestly, I still don't know how I feel about this book. I did rate it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so you know, above average. Could have been a solid 4, but it really wasn't. There were a lot of things that I just was not vibing with in this story, and I'm just gonna quickly go through that because I don't want to give too much away since it is a horror book. The synopsis here is: when Scylla and Nori arrive at their aunt's home, it's immediately clear that the manor is cursed. The endless creaking of the house at night and the eerie stillness of the woods surrounding them would be enough of a sign. But there are secrets too, questions that Scylla can't ignore. Who is the beautiful boy who's appeared from the woods? Who is the tall man with no eyes who Nori plays with in the basement at night? A man no one else can see. And why does it seem that ever since they arrived, the trees have been creeping closer? So that synopsis is eerie and chilling, and it made me want to pick up this book. And this is a YA horror book, so keep that in mind, like, you know. But The things that I did like, the imagery, I thought that Dawn Kurtagich did a phenomenal job at painting a picture of the creepiness of the manor, of the Blood Manor, the woods, and just like also the Creeper Man, who is like the antagonist in the story. And the Creeper Man definitely gives me Slender Man vibes. If you know, you know. I used to be terrified of the Slender Man when I was growing up, and so that, like, this book brought up my fears all over again, and for that I appreciated it. I appreciated the nostalgia, no matter how scary it was. I also think that, like, the Creeper Man not only gave Slender Man vibes, but he also gave Skinwalker vibes too, just because of the way Dawn Kurtagich described what he looked like and how he like moved and scurried through the woods. Oh, it gave me the creeps. Oh my gosh. The other thing that I really liked was the plot and the premise surrounding the manor and the woods and the folklore. I thought that that was really cool, and this would have been a perfect read for Halloween, to be honest, but I had to read it when I got it because I was just so intrigued. So some of the things that I didn't like was the writing style. I hated it. I'm sorry, I hated it. The main character, Scylla, is losing her mind. She is slowly and then rapidly descending into madness. Like, her mental health is deteriorating, and she starts to question everyone and everything, even herself. And the writing reflects that, and I understand why Dawn wrote the story that way, because, you know, she is unfortunately like losing her mind. But I just don't think that we needed to really write it in that way in order to really make it hit home. Some words were bolded, some words were italicized, some words were looked like they were falling off the page, some words like just were all like scrambled together, and I get it. I get the effect, okay, the theatrics, but like, it made the story a lot harder to read and a lot harder to get through, to be honest. Like, it took me a while to get through this, and it shouldn't have, because this book is only 337 pages, so that really irritated me. The length, and then moving on from that, the length of the story, way too long. Way too long. It did not need to be 337 pages. This could have been cut down to 230 maybe. Probably even, you know, under that. I just think that there was a lot of repetition in here. I found myself skipping chapters closer towards the end, and I found myself skimming through a lot of what was going on. And there was even a chapter where one of the main characters explains what you just read and what happened, and I just was like, wow. So I didn't even need to read half of this stuff. You could have just gave me this, okay? So there was a lot of filler in here and a lot of repetition, and I wasn't with that. And the last thing that I didn't care for, the ending. What the heck was that? If you read this book, please let me know, and let me know if we can talk about it, because what was that? What was that? Now I understand why some people don't like those type of endings, because it just made me feel like, what was the point of me reading all of this then? You know, I thought that the ending, and when we found out the truth, it made the story lose its luster a bit. So yeah, for that, I gave it a 3.5, but that's still high in my opinion. I still thought it was a very creepy book. It was very unsettling. Some of the images and some of the sounds that she would go into detail about in this story gave me the chills, and I still think about some of the things that I read about in that book. Like, I'm still kind of sitting here reeling from that, like, wow, that was a very disturbing scene, and it was a lot for me to digest. But other than that, I thought it was, you know, I did think it was a solid read. All right, y'all, so those are all of the books that I read for September. I thought it was a great reading month, like I said. Even though I only had 1 5-star, I still think that a lot of these books, if not all of them, were pretty solid. I didn't hate anything that I read, so that's amazing, to be honest. Hey y'all, so my camera died, so I'm filming on my phone right now. That's why the quality looks so bad, and I don't feel like waiting for it to charge. But I just wanted to say that that is the ending of the video. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you plan on reading for October, and let me know how your September reading month went. I would love to know. I love booktube just because, like, you can see everybody's different reading styles and tastes, and what people thought about certain books that you liked or certain books that you didn't like. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry again for the very chaotic ending to that, but hope you guys liked it, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.